A nice tool to have in your kit, whether or not you shoot factory ammo or hand loads or reloads, is going to be a case gauge. Case gauges are simple tools that can determine or tell you whether or not a cartridge, or rather the case of that cartridge, is within spec for that chamber. They sell them for pistols and rifles, and as you can see here, I have an L.E. Wilson case gauge for 223 Remington Sammy spec. Now, a lot of you might question, well, what happens if you shoot 5.56 or 223 Wild or some other variant? This is pretty much going to be the same for 5.56 NATO, 223 Wild, and 223 Remington Sammy spec, simply because the cartridge case is going to be virtually the same. And if you're loading for 223 Remington Sammy, it's going to work fine in 5.56 NATO. Anyway, what this does is, again, it'll tell you if the cartridge case is within spec, particularly within the sizing of the body, the base of the body, or the shoulder bump. So I have two sample case or cartridges here. I'm going to show you basically how it functions. It's pretty simple. Two ends on here. I'm going to drop the loaded cartridge into the gauge, and as you can see here, it presses in flush very easily. As you can see, the back end, the test here is to see if this is flush with the back of the gauge. Since it is, I know that it is within spec as far as the shoulder bump and the body diameter and the sizing of the body. So this is going to fit into the cartridge of a gun, and I will have no problems with feeding, ejection, and function, or it shouldn't have any problems feeding, ejection, or function, at least with the ammo, as far as the ammo is concerned. I'm going to go ahead and show you a reject cartridge here. I'm going to go ahead and drop the cartridge into the chamber, and as you can see, I'm pressing in here and it does not fit flush. The back of the case does not fit flush with the gauge. Now, it could be a couple things here. Obviously, it could either be the shoulder. I can't really see it because this gauge is stainless steel, or not stainless steel, but it's steel, and I can't see it through it. But it's either going to be an issue with the sizing of the body or the shoulder bump. The shoulder might be too far out, and so it's not seating in all the way. It's bumping up against the chamber or the gauge, or where it should be sitting, so it's not getting in flush all the way. In either case, this is a definition of reject, so I would not be shooting this in my gun, because if I loaded this into my rifle, it would most likely be out of battery and it wouldn't fire. And if it did fire, it could be a dangerous situation. So how would you use this in practice? Pretty much the case gauges are very handy. So if you're at the range or whatnot and you got some ammo that you bought and you started shooting in your gun and the ammo is having issues chambering, perhaps it's getting stuck and you can't get the loaded cartridge out by pulling out the charging handle or pulling the bolt, in which case you want to run that ammo through a case gauge to see if it's within spec. If the cartridges don't pass the case gauge, and obviously you're pretty sure that the ammo is bad spec and you should stop shooting it because it's not working. But if the ammo does pass the case gauge and is within spec, then you know that you probably need to check your rifle and see if there's something wrong with that gun to determine why it's not chambering properly, feeding properly, or ejecting properly. But I mean, again, this is a nice handy tool to have to help troubleshoot and diagnose any issues you might be having with your guns. You'll obviously have to buy one specific case gauge for each of the cartridges that you shoot, but these are pretty inexpensive. I think they're around 20 bucks or so, give or take, depending on what vendor you go to. I like to buy from Brownells, but you can go to Midway, Mid-South. Anybody who sells shooting supplies should carry these case gauges, especially if they deal in reloading supplies. But again, this is an L.E. Wilson case gauge. Check them out at Brownells or any other of your favorite shooting supply vendors.